Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are back with Duel Links. I know, kind of weird, but recently, semi-recently, a ban list was put into effect that put Darklord Ixchel back to 1, whereas previously she was more or less banned. She was semi-limited alongside Contact and Sanctified, which basically just meant that you weren't allowed to play Ixchel, because you do need Sanctified. It's kind of the whole game plan for Darklords, recycling Sanctified in order to get the effect multiple times to actually have disruption on the opponent's turn, which most of the time, most decks just kind of don't. And then we have Contact, which, you know, is the only real way to summon monsters, other than just like normal summoning them, which is not exactly the greatest of game plans. So, with Ixchel also semi-banned, we weren't actually able to play a whole lot of, or we weren't able to really make a consistent deck. So what I decided to do was revisit this deck now that it is once again able to play Ixchel, and see if the deck is more consistent and able to actually compete at all with things currently. And I will tell you right now, it doesn't. It just doesn't. The problem is that a lot of the decks that are currently out just have a better game plan overall. They have more that they can do. They actually have disruption or OTK potential or stuff like that, while also being consistent thanks to the help of skills. A lot of skills make a myriad of decks consistent. Whether or not they're able to OTK or what have you doesn't really matter, because if they're able to be consistent, they can play a lot more back row, which means that they are able to effectively disrupt you. Darklords cannot do that, and the reason they can't play back row is because of the skill. They basically always need to find banishment. If they can find banishment, they're off to the races. So of course we're playing Draw Send Spell Trap, right? Draw Send Spell Trap basically says draw banishment. Lose 1,000 life points, draw, just draw banishment. It's not quite that simple, but that's basically what it does in this deck. And then because of that, in order to actually deal with back row, as well as occasionally in order to deal with monsters, we have Archfiend Eccentric, which is a monster, not a spell, meaning that you, instead of drawing this, or like other such back row removal, you are able to remain, you're still able to play back row removal without actually playing another spell or trap. So that's very nice, and you're just more likely to see your banishment. All things considered, though, well, let's just do the quick card by card. We'll hop into some replays, and then I'll give you my thoughts afterwards. So we have the two Archfiend Eccentric. We have one Desire, one Ixchel, one Morningstar as our big boss monsters, both the Desires and the Morningstar. They're not both necessary, but I like having Morningstar. Definitely need Desires, though. Or Desire, I should say. As for other cards you could potentially put in, you could maybe put in the third Ukobak. I'm not a big fan of it. You could put in the third Archfiend. Little bricky. You do need to max out on Darklord names, so just having Morningstar as a potential follow-up is nice, as well as just another name. Then we have Triple Nastin. The main way that we're actually getting monsters onto the field is through Nastin, or not really, but is through Nastin or Amdusk, and like it's just a very good way to get a body off of or into the graveyard for a potential follow-up, or to just get a body on the field, which oftentimes is required. Next up, we have Double Tez. Tez is just absolutely insane because you're able to just protect your monsters without really having any sort of response window. So yeah, just having this is very nice. Then we have the Triple Amdusk and Double Ukobak. Triple Amdusk because you need to revive or add back cards from the graveyard, notably things like Contact, Sanctified, even occasionally Banishment, which you can send to the graveyard with the Ukobak, so very nice, all things considered. That's also why we're playing multiple Ukobaks and why you could play up to 3, because if you go normal summon Ukobak, go Amdusk, pitch another Darklord, add back something like your Banishment, it's basically copies 4, 5, and 6 of Banishment, so there's that. Next up, we have obviously the Triple Banishment. Absolute heart and soul of the deck. We have the one Contact and the one Sanctified. Pretty standard list, all things considered. However, with the Ixchel, we now have taken out the Monster Reborn, which is limited to 1 as well, so we can't play that. But all things considered, that's actually better for us, because that means our Draw Send Spell Trap is more likely to actually see the Banishment rather than something useless, or less useful, I should say. However, not having access to a Monster Reborn to potentially get basically another copy of Contact is a little lame. Now, Why are we not playing something like Superbia to get more monsters onto our side of the field? Simply put, we don't need it. It's honestly a little bit too bricky. It doesn't really give us anything. It's not like there are good rank 8s in the format, nor do we really have access to rank 8s in general with this list. As you can see, basically, we have like no other rank or level 8 Darklords, so not really worth it. And yes, it can be good to like get another body onto your field, but it's kind of a win more card, so it's not really good for consistency. That's why I'm not playing it. As for the extra deck, it's basically just a whole bunch of Link monsters that may come up occasionally, but most of the time, they don't. The big thing to include, though, is the rank 3 Alucard, because it deals with back row. Sometimes you need to deal with back row, and if you have something like a double Ukobak or an Archfiend Eccentric and an Ukobak, you could potentially go into this guy, which is very nice. And then Dante. I actually did use this. The very first duel that I had using this deck, I did go into Dante. Is this necessary? Not at all, not even close. But it was very nice because I was able to go Ixchel into this guy, dump another 3, and I was able to get another banishment into the graveyard, as well as another name to revive off of the contact that was in the graveyard. So that was very nice, but all things considered, not necessary. Just nice to have. As for the other extra deck monsters, they kind of don't matter. So yeah, let's hop into the duels and show you how this deck performs. Alright, so first things first, we are going first, but I want you to ignore what my opponent is doing most of the time, because this isn't really about them, it's about me, and it's about Darklords, right? So this is more so just to show you, like, does the deck still do what it's supposed to do? Is it more consistent thanks to Ixchel, and what have you? Honestly, hey, we drew Banishment. That's as good as you can get. We're going to search out the contact. We're going to go Ukobak, send the Amdusk. Amdusk is then going to be revived with the contact. And then we will search out our Sanctified. Sanctified is then going to be set, and we're going to pass the turn. There's not really a whole lot more that I can do about this. Just, like, this is what the deck does. We set the Sanctified, or we send it to the graveyard, and we pass, right? All things considered, that's kind of it. Honestly, setting Sanctified is a little bit dangerous. There are a lot of people who are playing specifically Cyclone, Cosmic Cyclone, to potentially banish your Sanctified or your Contact or something like that. But all things considered, most people are just playing MSD anyway, so Sanctified is fine. My opponent is on the best deck of the format, Mech Knights. However, with only one card in the extra, which they did end up summoning. I'm going to go and negate their monster by getting rid of the Ukobak. The reason I do this is to prevent damage, but more importantly, to bring it back so that we can go Ukobak in order to send the Nastin. Now, I know what you're saying. Why didn't we send something like a Banishment? Well, with Spell Trap, Search, Draw, Send, Spell Trap, we're able to just draw into it anyway. We're going to search out the contact, and then I'm also going to add the Ukobak to my hand. We're then going to special summon our Nastin. This is a bit of a mistake. I realistically should have just normal summoned the Ukobak first, but oops. Anyway, I'm going to send away their monster with the Desires that I tribute summoned and then walk in. They top deck Red Moon, which is quite frankly one of the best top decks that they could have had. However, we already had the Tez in hand, so it didn't really matter, all things considered. But yeah, I let them pop the Ukobak, and then we're going to, in the battle phase, negate our own monster's effect to boost it back up to that 3k. Pretty standard stuff for Darklords from what we've seen. Moving on, we go for the Banishment to search back that Sanctified once again, and then we're going to search again. My opponent realizes that the game is over, and they technically connection fail, but you know they rage quit. And here we are once again against Seto Kaiba. Yep, you know, sometimes it's just Seto Kaiba. We are going second this time, so a little bit more interesting. And we drew the Archfiend Eccentric, as you can see here. So yeah, this is the reason why we are playing this card. It's pretty simple, just like a bad MSD. Anyway, we're going to go for Banishment here in order to go for our Amdusk to add back the Tez, because basically the only thing that I can realistically end on is a Sanctified pass. We do have the Amdusk to add a bit more protection, but we don't really have all that much going for us. Now, my opponent is going to flip up Penguin Soldier. Oh my gosh. I actually have to negate this, because if I don't, I'm just open to attack. And they did end up normal summoning the Chris, so I'm expecting something along the lines of a like a Blackwing core, like Gale or Bora or something like that, which could potentially then push for lethal, which I really don't want to have happen. So yeah, turns out they have Monster Reborn, so I'm just going to negate their summon basically and summon out my own Amdusk, which has already used its effect, so it's not like it's doing anything. But yeah, out comes our Amdusk, and we are going to draw for turn contact. Not the greatest of draws, but I'm going to tribute summon out the Tez. We're going to then special summon it back our Amdusk with the contact, and then pass the turn. During their end phase, they're going to set a card and pass it back to us. We're going to go for our Amdusk again using our contact. Pass back, draw Sense Spell Trap. We're going to draw into contact again. What the heck? Anyway, I'm going to flip the Amdusk to attack, walk over their 2 monsters. They're going to set 2 and pass. Then they're going to bounce with the Zephyros. I don't know why they decided to do this instead, but it's fine. They go for Countergate. I'm just going to kind of clean this up. Eventually, I draw into a Banishment. Heaven forbid, I draw into something useful. Eventually, we go Desire, walk over Shieldwing, or sorry, send it to the graveyard with Desire, which is so funny because had I not done this, I wouldn't have been able to actually get over their monster. Very funny, but yeah, there you go. Alright, and here we are against Jaden, which is probably Heroes, once again going second. And I swear my opponent just never has a full extra deck. Granted, these were played in like Bronze, so there's that. Again, this is mostly just to see like, hey, does the deck actually perform better with Ixchel? I don't think we've seen Ixchel this entire time. So, you know, not the greatest, but not the worst. They're playing Lightsworn. They're gonna do their Lightsworn thing and end on, like, nothing. Yeah, classic Lightsworns, you know. Anyway, we drew Amdusk, which isn't the worst, but it's also not the best. But we do get to go Ukoback Amdusk in order to grab up our Banishment. Banishment will then grab us our Contact, and then we can contact back the Amdusk, and then use its effect in order to search out another monster. I'm going to search out the Ixchel here, and I'm like, well, I already have the Sanctified Engrave, which I don't really want because I do want to get rid of this Ukoback because I am going to be low on life points. So I'm trying to think of like what is the best thing to do. I think I just go for the draw here anyway. We draw into a second Ukoback, which is very funny, but we drew into another Nastin as well. So I'm going to link off into the Code Talker, then special summon out the Nastin, which then allows us to contact back our Ixchel. I'm going to walk into the 2 monsters and pass the turn. They do have Michael. I'm just going to negate that. They don't really have that many cards left as well, so I'm not really too worried, all things considered. But if they go for another Michael, it is pretty dire. They don't, and they just walk into Code Talker, so there's that. Anyway, we are going to go and get our Banishment. Banishment, search out the Contact. You've seen this before. This is pretty standard. We're also going to search out Desire to pretty much just end the game here. So I'm going to tribute over the Nastin, send away their monster, go for the Contact, the Ukoback to contact or to send the Banishment to search out the Sanctified so that we can get rid of the Ukoback if need be, attack in for lethal. Good game. Alright, I swear there is another character other than Seto Kaiba, but you would not believe that in the lower ranks of Yu-Gi-Oh! Again, going second. Going second just seems to be the way to play. My opponent is playing a Life Boost Alpha because it's funny. And finally, Ixchel! Yes, let's see how it works. So my opponent, well, let's ignore that. I actually drew an insane hand, so we're going to go for the Ixchel here. We're going to pitch the Ukoback. We're going to go for the Contact Ixchel to go for the Ukoback to send another Ukoback because it's funny. And we already have it, the Nastin. So we're going to go for the Nastin here, and we are going to then... my opponent, just ignore them. They're not doing anything. We're going to go for the Nastin here. We are then going to normal summon our Desires. And during the battle phase, after the attack is declared with our Desire, we are going to negate its effect in order to boost up to that 3k to get lethal over the life point boost alpha. So, pretty nice there. Nice little OTK. Yes, Ixchel did help there because it got the 2 bodies into the graveyard and drew into the Nastin. So yeah, Ixchel was very helpful there. But I also drew a really good hand anyway. And I probably could have OTK'd even without that. So, cool. So, all things considered and rectified, Darklords are still bad. The reason for it, simply put, they don't do enough. They're inconsistent still, even though they have Ixchel available to them. They don't really put up much interaction because they kind of need to continually cycle a Banishment. They don't really have all that much access to additional like tech cards, which is wildly important in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links because, hey, if you don't have a card for a specific matchup, if you're not able to interact with your opponent as they do their combo, they're just going to unicorn you or just set 3 back row, right, and stuff like that. And you don't really have an answer to that, right? You're not able to tech in additional cards because then you become too breaky. So, all things considered, Darklords used to be the epitome of consistency, and now with Ixchel limited to 1, they are a shell of their former selves. In all reality, could Darklords come back off of the list? No. I think the most that could happen is, like, maybe put this to 1, put this to 2, and put this to... You couldn't do that. Maybe put this to 3, and this to 3, and this to 1. Maybe something like that would work, so that you can only play the one copy of Sanctified. You can play multiple copies of either Contact or Ixchel, which would then give them a little bit more consistency. Would it break the game? Probably, all things considered. Darklords have a notorious challenge with balance in this game because it adds consistency to an already small pool of cards. With only 20 cards, you can basically make any deck consistent. You just need Ixchel and any other Darklord, which is pretty easy to come by within 20 cards, and then you're able to get basically any combo that you want. At least that's within the game, which is where the problems tend to arise. It's not so much what Darklords do with themselves, but more so what they do paired with other cards. So, do I think they could come off the list? Probably not. All things in line, all things unbanned. Darklords are still a bit of a problem. They're not nearly as bad as like Thunder Dragons or something like that. But hey, at least they don't have an overpowered skill. And for the sake of argument, at least it's fun, right? At least now we have the limited one Ixchel. We can still play her, which is nice. We can still draw our 2 cards, right? If we have a particularly terrible hand, potentially we are able to see a slightly better hand, which is nice. But it's not going anywhere. Darklords are still in the gutter as they are in Master Duel, as they are in the TCG and the OCG, and in Duel Links and in Speed Duels. They don't exist, so we'll not talk about those. And in Rush Duel, no, they don't exist there either. But, I mean, you get the point, right? Ixchel just doesn't do enough. And it's sad. So, anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, a like is very much so appreciated. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Yu-Gi-Oh! That isn't Duel Links, then just be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.